Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a really hard look at three cases. Three cases that, honestly, they've kind of defined modern crime history over nearly 60 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. These are the ones that stick with you. They genuinely changed how we all think about family safety, about the police, even our understanding of evil itself.
We've gathered a lot of material here. We've got the facts, well, sometimes disastrous investigations, and all those questions that still linger around Madeleine McCann's disappearance, JonBenét Ramsey's murder, and the Manson family killings.
And what really ties them together, I think, is how they challenged that fundamental belief we often have, that justice, eventually prevails. These cases make you question that.
Okay, so let's try and unpack this. Let's maybe contrast the specific type of horror in each case, because they're all devastating, obviously, but the way the violation happens is quite different. First, you've got the vanishing. Madeleine McCann, 3 years old, gone from an apartment, 180 feet away from her parents?
Yeah, just 180 feet. It taps into that really deep primal fear, doesn't it? The
Right.
stranger danger thing. Taking a child from somewhere you thought was safe.
And then, boom, the complete contrast. The domestic horror of JonBenét Ramsey. Here, the violation is, well, it's internal.
Right. The parents wake up, find this incredibly long, detailed ransom note.
Only to find her body hours later,
Yeah.
hidden,
Yeah.
in their own basement.
In the wine cellar, yeah. So the sources really point to the threat never being outside the house.
Yeah.
The crime scene was the family home itself, which immediately, shifts suspicion inwards.
And then the third one, the cult of chaos. Sharon Tate, pregnant actress, her friends, just slaughtered
Yeah.
by followers of Charles Manson, this 32-year-old ex-con guru.
And this wasn't just random violence or, a moment of rage. It was planned. It was systematic, rooted in this completely delusional philosophy about starting a race war.
Based on the Beatles, of all things.
Yeah, unbelievably. So our mission today really is to get into the weeds, the specific details, the huge investigative failures, the media frenzies, which sometimes helped, sometimes really hurt, and those persistent questions that link these three massive cultural moments.
Right. We want to show you exactly why these cases, even decades later, still haunt us. Why they're still debated, still costing millions, still unresolved in many ways. Okay, let's kick things off with Madeleine McCann. That disappearance in Praia da Luz, Portugal, May 3rd, 2007. It just exploded onto the global stage immediately.
The setting itself is so key because it was meant to be, perfect. The Algarve, a family-friendly resort. Kate and Jerry McCann, both doctors, respected professionals.
Yeah, a GP and a cardiologist on holiday with Madeleine, who is 3, and their 2-year-old twins. It just paints this picture of, middle-class stability, safety.
And right at the heart of it all is that decision. The one they made that night, which, changed everything forever, they decided to dine with friends. The group later called the Tapas 7.
At a restaurant that was, about 180 feet from their ground floor apartment, Block 5A.
And they had a system, or they thought they did, to justify it. The kids were put down around 7:30 p.m. Parents left about an hour later, 8:30 p.m.
Okay, and the timeline of the checks they did is absolutely crucial here, isn't it?
Hugely. So Jerry McCann checked at 9:05 p.m. He reported seeing Madeleine, said everything looked normal.
Right. But then comes the failure point. The next check, 9:40 p.m. It wasn't one of the parents. It was a friend from the group, Matthew Oldfield.
And the sources are really clear on this. He only listened at the door. He didn't go in, didn't visually check the children were actually there.
Wow, so just 25 minutes after Jerry's check, there's this gap. No visual confirmation? That could have been the window, right?
It seems entirely possible. That 180-foot distance, it feels close. Close enough maybe to think, okay, a quick check is fine. But it proved tragically, devastatingly too far.
And then at 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann goes to check.
And finds Madeleine gone. Just missing from her bed. That moment, her scream, "They've taken her!" That's the starting gun for the global media storm.
It really highlights that impossible choice, doesn't it? Relying on proximity, on a system that just failed by a matter of feet. #B, early investigative failures and public reaction.
In that initial panic, that chaos, it led straight into some really critical mistakes by the Portuguese police, the Polícia Judiciária.
Yeah.
Mistakes that arguably poisoned the investigation from the very start.
The first huge one being, the apartment wasn't sealed off as a crime scene right away.
No, which is just basic procedure, isn't it? But it allowed massive contamination. Family, friends, resort staff, even locals just milling around, searching, touching things, potentially destroying crucial forensic evidence, fingerprints, DNA, fibers, anything.
And it wasn't just the scene contamination, was it? There were other big oversights.
Oh, yeah. The border with Spain, it's only about an hour away from Praia de Luz. It wasn't closed or put on high alert until the next day.
So if someone took her quickly?
They had a clear run across an international border. Hours head start.
And the sniffer dogs? Those specialized dogs that might have indicated, something early on.
They weren't brought in for 4 months. 4 months. By then, any scent trails would be long gone. These early failures really damaged public trust in the Portuguese investigation.
And then you had the sightings complicating things even further.
Right. Conflicting sightings. Jane Tanner, one of the Tapa's 7 friends, said she saw a man carrying a child in pink pajamas around 9:15 p.m., walking away from the apartment block.
Okay, so that fits an early abduction timeline.
Potentially. But then another family, the Smiths, reported seeing a man carrying a sleeping child towards the beach area around 10:00 p.m. Different time, slightly different location. The police were chasing ghosts almost immediately.
But amidst all this confusion, the image of Madeleine herself became iconic.
Absolutely. Those photos were everywhere, focusing on her right eye, specifically that rare defect she had, the coloboma, where the pupil sort of drips down into the iris.
The idea was that distinctive feature would make her instantly recognizable, right? Aid identification anywhere in the world.
Exactly. Millions of posters, endless news reports featuring that specific detail.
And we should probably mention the context here, the sort of sociological angle our sources point out.
Yeah, it's important. The sheer scale of the attention the McCann case got was, well, disproportionate compared to many other missing children cases.
The whole missing white woman syndrome idea.
Pretty much. Madeleine fit that profile. A pretty blonde white child from a middle-class professional family. That profile, tragically, often guarantees far more media coverage and resources than missing children from other backgrounds receive. It's an uncomfortable truth about how these stories are often selected and amplified. ###C. The Arguido twist and discredited evidence.
Then the case took this absolutely shocking turn. September 2007, 4 months in. The Portuguese police declare Kate and Jerry McCann official suspects. They make them Arguidos.
That was a bombshell. It completely fractured the narrative. The grieving parents, who'd been the focus of global sympathy, were suddenly suspects in the eyes of the Portuguese law.
And the media just went into overdrive, didn't it? Especially the tabloids. Intense speculation about their guilt. They went from victims to defendants overnight, basically.
And the justification for making them Arguidos was, well, it turned out to be incredibly thin. It really hinged on those cadaver dogs, the ones brought in months late.
Right. The dogs supposedly alerted to the scent of human remains and blood. In the apartment, and later, crucially, in a rental car, the McCanns hired weeks after Madeleine disappeared.
Based on that, the police developed this theory. Madeleine died accidentally in the apartment, the parents disposed of the body, and then staged the abduction to cover it up.
But that whole line of reasoning just fell apart under scrutiny, didn't it?
Completely. The forensic evidence, the supposed DNA matches from the car and apartment. The British Forensic Science Service analyzed them and found they were inconclusive. The samples were tiny, degraded, potentially mixed DNA from multiple people. Not enough to say anything definitive.
And the reliability of the cadaver dogs themselves was questioned.
Massively questioned, especially in court settings. Dog alerts are just indications of an odor. They aren't proof of remains, let alone proof of guilt. They can be triggered by other things. It's not definitive forensic evidence.
So with that flimsy evidence collapsing, the Portuguese authorities had to backtrack.
Yeah. In July 2008, the Attorney General archived the case. They formally lifted the Arguido status from Kate and Jerry McCann due to lack of evidence.
Legally cleared. But the damage is done, wasn't it? That seed of doubt once planted by the police and amplified by the media, it's hard to get rid of. We see that theme again later.
Definitely. But the McCanns never stopped searching. They launched this huge public campaign, raised millions through the Find Madeleine Fund, and their persistence eventually led the UK government to step in.
That's Operation Grange, right? Scotland Yard's review. Started in 2011.
Yes, and it became one of the most expensive missing person investigations in British history, costing over $13 million of taxpayer money to date. Shows you the level of public pressure and, frankly, the political will involved by that point.
And Grange looked at everything, didn't they? Not just the abduction theory.
Everything. Botched burglaries, other suspicious incidents in the area around that time. They identified something like 600 individuals of interest. They even meticulously analyzed 4 specific suspicious phone calls made near the resort on that night. It was, and still is, incredibly thorough. #AD. The Christian Bruckner Bombshell 2020. Which leads us to the most significant development in years. The Christian Bruckner Bombshell in 2020. This just shifted the whole focus back, powerfully to that original nightmare, the stranger abduction.
Okay, so who is Christian Bruckner?
He's a German national, a convicted sex offender, specifically targeting children. And crucially, he was living this transient life in the Algarve region back in 2007. He has an extensive criminal history.
But it's the digital evidence that's really compelling here, isn't it? Found years later.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His mobile phone records, they place him definitively in Praia de Luz on the night of May 3rd.
Okay.
And the timing is critical. Our sources show he received a phone call which ended just 1 hour before Madeleine was reported missing.
1 hour before Kate found her gone. Wow.
Yeah. And then, critically, his phone data indicates he left the immediate vicinity of the resort shortly after that call ended, but still within that crucial time frame before the alarm was raised. It puts him right there, right then.
And there was other stuff too, right? His behavior afterwards?
Suspicious behavior. He lived nearby at the time. He drove a very distinctive VW camper van, the kind often associated with the transient lifestyles. That van was later searched and found to contain child sexual abuse material.
Oh.
And the day after Madeleine disappeared, he re-registered a different car, a Jaguar, under someone else's name, which looks a lot like someone trying to quickly change their identity or ditch a vehicle potentially linked to a crime.
So the German authorities, the prosecutors, they seem convinced it's him.
They do. Prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters has made some really strong, quite controversial statements. He said they have evidence Madeleine is dead, and they are officially treating the case as a murder investigation.
And this is the huge sticking point, they don't have her body.
No body. And no definitive smoking gun physical evidence directly linking Bruckner to the inside of that apartment. They've searched properties linked to him, like an allotment garden in Hanover, Germany. But so far, publicly at least, nothing's been found. No remains.
So here we are, 18 years later, still this huge unanswered question hanging over everything. Madeleine would be 21 now.
And you've got this incredibly complex situation. 3 countries involve the UK, Portugal, Germany, all running parallel or overlapping investigations. Different legal systems, different standards of proof. It's a bureaucratic tangle that just adds layers of difficulty to finding any final resolution. It's still very much an active but deeply frustrating investigation. Okay, let's pivot now. We go from a child vanishing from a holiday resort to something completely different but just as horrifying. The JonBenét Ramsey case. This takes us to Boulder, Colorado, an affluent town, and it starts the morning after Christmas, 1996.
And the context here really shaped the media frenzy that followed, didn't it? The whole child beauty pageant world.
Oh, absolutely. JonBenét was 6 years old. She'd won titles like Little Miss Colorado, America's Royale Miss. Those images, those videos of her in elaborate costumes, adult-style makeup, they became instantly controversial.
Yeah, there was this huge public debate about whether it was appropriate, and it created this really unsettling contrast with the brutal way she died.
And the horror for the family began with Patsy Ramsey's 911 call. It was 5:52 a.m., December 26th. Hysterical, reporting she'd found a ransom note on the back staircase. The initial belief was kidnapping. #tag May, the ransom note, and critical failures.
That ransom note, it's become one of the most infamous, most analyzed pieces of evidence in American crime history.
It really has. First off, it was incredibly long, like 2.5 pages.
And the crucial detail, written on a notepad belonging to the Ramsey family.
Yes, using a pen found right there in the house. This immediately screamed that whoever wrote it spent a significant amount of time inside the Ramsey home, undisturbed, unhurried.
And the content was just bizarre, wasn't it?
Completely bizarre. It specifically addressed John Ramsey. It demanded exactly $118,000.
And that amount, $118,000.
Turned out to be almost the exact amount of John Ramsey's recent work bonus. Just incredibly specific. Too specific for a random kidnapper, you'd think.
And it was signed weirdly, too. A small foreign faction, SBTC. What did that even mean?
Nobody knows for sure. It sounded theatrical. Over the top, handwriting analysis, trying to link it to Patsy Ramsey, was ultimately inconclusive. But the language just didn't fit any known pattern for genuine ransom demands.
And right after this bizarre note is found, the investigation just goes completely off the rails.
A total systemic failure. The Boulder police arrived, treated it initially as a kidnapping, yes, but they failed, catastrophically, to secure the house as a crime scene.
They let people just wander in.
Yeah. Family, friends, people from their church, victim advocates, they were allowed in to comfort John and Patsy. For hours. Walking around, touching things, potentially cleaning, effectively destroying the integrity of the crime scene for nearly 7 hours.
7 hours. Unbelievable. And that contamination directly led to maybe the biggest blunder of all.
Arguably, yes. Around 1:00 p.m., almost 7 hours after the 911 call, Detective Linda Arndt, who was there with the family, asked John Ramsey and a family friend to search the house again for anything unusual.
The police asked him to search.
Yes. And John Ramsey went straight to the basement, to the wine cellar, a room the police seemed to have somehow missed in their initial sweep. And there he found JonBenét's body, covered with her white blanket.
Okay, but wait. He found her. Then what happened? Why did Detective Arndt let him touch her? Move her. Our sources must cover this.
They do, and it points to just utter chaos and maybe a lack of experience or training for that specific situation. Detective Arndt was likely overwhelmed. Instead of immediately stopping everything and securing that specific location as the primary scene,
she let John Ramsey pick up his daughter's body.
Yes. He carried her body upstairs, which is just a devastating mistake from a forensic perspective. It completely compromised any spatial evidence. Evidence about the ligature, the blanket positioning, trace evidence on the floor where she lay, everything. The body should never have been moved until the coroner and forensic team arrived and processed the scene meticulously. That single action potentially lost crucial clues forever. #tag forensic evidence and contradictions. The autopsy then revealed just how brutal the attack was. JonBenét died from 2 distinct causes. Asphyxia by strangulation.
With that garrote, right, made from cord and part of Patsy's paintbrush handle.
Exactly. A homemade garrote. And she suffered massive cranial cerebral trauma, an 8.5-inch skull fracture. The violence was extreme.
And then there were these other weird contradictory details that just fueled suspicion towards the family.
There was evidence presented that suggested possible chronic sexual abuse. Although that finding itself has been disputed by some experts over the years, it wasn't clear-cut.
But the pineapple thing was pretty concrete, wasn't it?
The pineapple mystery, yeah. Undigested pineapple was found in her stomach during the autopsy. This means she must have eaten it just a few hours before she died.
But John and Patsy both insisted, repeatedly, they didn't give her any pineapple that night. That she went straight to bed after coming home.
Right, so it created this direct contradiction in their timeline of events. Where did the pineapple come from? Who gave it to her? It remains unexplained.
So you've got the ransom note written inside, the contaminated scene, no sign of forced entry. The pineapple, it's almost inevitable suspicion fell on the family, wasn't it?
Almost immediately. And their actions afterwards, like hiring high-profile lawyers and media consultants very quickly.
Yeah.
While understandable maybe from a legal protection standpoint.
It just looked bad publicly. It fed that perception that they were hiding something rather than acting like typical grieving parents.
Exactly. And theories started swirling. The Burke theory gained a lot of traction that maybe her 9-year-old brother Burke accidentally hit her, perhaps in an argument over that pineapple, causing the head injury, and the parents then covered it up to protect him.
Or the Patsy theory that maybe Patsy did it in a fit of rage, perhaps triggered by bedwetting or something related to the pageants. And proponents of that pointed to fibers from her jacket being found on the duct tape over JonBenét's mouth and on the ligature. #D legal twists and the DNA intruder theory.
The case took another massive legal turn in 1999. A grand jury, after hearing evidence for months, actually voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey.
They voted to indict on what charges?
Charges including child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. It suggested the grand jury believed there was enough probable cause to proceed.
But they were never actually charged, were they? This is where it gets really complicated.
Right, because the district attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, refused to sign the indictment. He chose not to prosecute.
And nobody knew the grand jury had voted to indict until years later. Right, 2013.
Exactly. It was revealed much later. Hunter's reasoning was that, despite the grand jury's vote, he didn't believe he had enough evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in a trial. He thought the case was too flawed, too contaminated. But that decision caused huge controversy in Boulder and beyond.
Okay, so no charges. But then came the DNA evidence, the thing that pointed away from the family.
Yes. The DNA exoneration in 2008. This was a major development. Unidentified male DNA was found in JonBenét's underwear. And also a tiny amount under her fingernails.
From an unknown person.
An unknown male. Using more advanced touch DNA testing techniques, the new DA, Mary Lacey, concluded this pointed to an intruder. She formally exonerated the entire Ramsey family, John, Patsy, and Burke, and issued a public apology for the suspicion they'd lived under for over a decade.
So, case closed for the family, intruder theory confirmed.
Well, legally, yes, they were exonerated. But the controversy didn't entirely disappear. Critics, and our sources detail this, question the interpretation of that DNA evidence.
Why What was the issue?
The main issue was the amount of DNA found. It was incredibly small, trace amounts, far less than you might expect to find if that person was the actual perpetrator involved in such a violent struggle and assault.
So the argument was it could be contamination.
Exactly. Could it be incidental transfer from someone who handled clothing during manufacturing, or just random secondary contact somewhere? The quantity wasn't large enough to definitively rule out contamination, even though it was enough to create reasonable doubt about the family's involvement and lead to the exoneration.
So it cleared them legally, but didn't necessarily convince everyone factually.
Precisely. It leaves that lingering question mark for many people.
Which brings us to the grim reality today. 29 years, still officially unsolved.
Yep. One of America's most infamous cold cases. The investigation has cost, estimates suggest, over $13 million. And what we're left with is, well, a mess. Catastrophic early mistakes, conflicting evidence, and that single profile of unknown male DNA. A silent witness that maybe, just maybe, future technology could finally identify. Okay, so we've seen how contamination and domestic secrets plagued the Ramsey case. Our third case, though, shifts gears entirely. Here, the failure isn't just forensic, it's almost philosophical. How do we deal with crime driven by pure nihilistic ideology? We're talking, of course, about the Manson family murders.
This really shattered the whole late 60s peace and love vibe, didn't it? It exposed a really dark underbelly.
Completely. And it all starts with Charles Manson himself, born 1934. His life was just cycles of neglect, institutions, petty crime. He gets released from prison in 1967. He's 32.
And lands right in the middle of the summer of love in California.
Perfect timing for him. He finds these vulnerable young people, often from middle-class backgrounds, who are looking for meaning, for community, maybe rebelling.
But he wasn't offering peace and love, was he? He was offering control.
Total psychological manipulation. He set himself up as this guru figure. Used LSD heavily, mind games, isolation tactics at Spawn Ranch, that old movie set where they lived. He got his followers to completely cut ties with their families, transferring all loyalty to him. He claimed he was Christ reincarnated, could read minds. Classic cult leader stuff.
And the core of his twisted ideology was helter-skelter.
Yes. This apocalyptic race war he believed was imminent. And incredibly, he claimed the blueprint for it, the instructions, were hidden in the lyrics of the Beatles' White Album.
Seriously, he interpreted Beatles songs as a call to murder.
That was his claim. His motive, according to prosecutors, was absolutely insane. He wanted to trigger this race war. His plan was to commit these incredibly brutal murders.
And make it look like black groups, like the Black Panthers maybe, had done them, to incite white society into a violent backlash.
Exactly. To kickstart Armageddon, basically, with him and his family emerging to rule afterwards. It's completely delusional, but that was the twisted logic driving the violence. Hashtag B. The two nights of terror. So, August 8th, going into August 9th, 1969, the first night of terror. The location, 1050 Cielo Drive in Benedict Canyon.
And he targeted that specific house for a reason, right? It wasn't random.
No, it was because a music producer, Terry Melcher, used to live there. Manson felt Melcher had slighted him, rejected his music. So there's this element of revenge against the establishment, against the place Melcher represented.
Even though Melcher didn't live there anymore, Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski did.
Sources suggest Manson might not have even known Tate was living there. The target was a house, the symbol. But Tate was there, 8.5 months pregnant.
Along with Jay Sebring, a celebrity hairstylist, Abigail Folger, the coffee heiress, her boyfriend Wojciech Frykowski, and a young visitor, Stephen Parent, who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Manson didn't go in himself that night. He directed 4 of his core followers, Tex Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian, who acted as the driver and lookout.
And the violence was just horrific, almost ritualistic.
Unbelievably savage. Watson apparently announced, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." They suffered, in total, 102 stab wounds, plus gunshots. It was overkill, designed to shock.
And the detail about Sharon Tate, begging for her baby's life.
It's beyond horrifying, pleading for her unborn child. Susan Atkins later reportedly said Tate's cries just annoyed her. Atkins stabbed her 16 times, and they left that message, scrawled in blood on the front door. Pig.
But one night wasn't enough for Manson.
Apparently not. He felt the Cielo Drive murders were too messy, too chaotic, that they didn't clearly send the helter-skelter message he intended. He reportedly said he needed to show them how it's done properly.
So they went out again, the very next night.
Yes. August 9th into August 10th. This time, Manson went along initially with Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Steve Grogan. They drove around looking for victims. They ended up at the Los Feliz home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a supermarket executive and his wife, chosen apparently at random.
And Manson went inside this time.
Briefly, we went in with Watson, tied up the LaBiancas, then, crucially, he left. He sent the others back in to commit the murders. This reinforces that pattern. Manson directing, controlling, ordering the violence, but often maintaining that slight physical distance, especially from the act of killing itself.
Which becomes key in his trial later, right? The conspiracy angle.
Absolutely. And the LaBianca scene was, if possible, even more grotesque, designed to sow maximum terror and confusion, to look like the work of revolutionaries. Leno LaBianca was stabbed 12 times. The word war was carved into his abdomen.
And they left a fork sticking out of him.
A two-pronged carving fork, yes. Rosemary LaBianca was stabbed 41 times. And again, messages were left in blood. On the walls. Death to pigs. On the refrigerator door. Helter-skelter. Misspelled. ##Z. The trial and the conspiracy conviction. Getting Manson and the family wasn't straightforward initially. The police didn't immediately connect the Tate and LaBianca murders. The break didn't come from forensics at the scene.
So how did they crack it?
It came months later. Susan Atkins was arrested on unrelated charges, car theft, I think. While in jail, she started bragging, boasting to her cellmates about her involvement in the Tate murders, giving graphic details.
Just bragging about it.
Incredible, isn't it? But that boasting led investigators to connect the dots between the family and the murders.
And the trial itself, 1971, was just a spectacle.
The total media circus. Manson and his followers, particularly the women on trial with him, acted as this single defiant unit. They sang, they chanted, they disrupted proceedings, they carved X's into their foreheads.
Manson later changed his X to a swastika, didn't he?
He did. Symbolizing, he claimed, being crossed out and rejected by society. It was performance art, designed to intimidate and grab headlines. And it worked. The nation was absolutely gripped and horrified.
But legally, how did the prosecution nail Manson himself, given he wasn't physically present at the Tate murders and only briefly at LaBianca's?
That's where prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi made legal history. He built his case around the conspiracy theory, arguing Manson was guilty of first-degree murder because he masterminded and ordered the killings, even if he didn't wield the knife himself.
Based on the helter-skelter motive.
Exactly. Bugliosi had to establish Manson's absolute control over his followers, his intent, the mens rea, for the murders to happen as part of his helter-skelter plan.
And Linda Kasabian's testimony was key there, wasn't it? She was at both scenes but didn't kill anyone.
Crucial. Kasabian was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony. She provided that insider view of Manson's control, his orders, the motive. She described how he directed everything. Her testimony directly linked Manson's commands to the actions of the killers.
So the conviction wasn't based on Manson physically committing murder, but on the power of his control, his conspiracy to commit murder, a really important legal precedent.
Absolutely. It established that you can be convicted of murder if you orchestrate it, even without being physically present. The philosophical evil, the intent and control, was legally equivalent to the physical act.
And the outcome.
Manson, Watson, Atkins, Krenwinkel, Van Houten, all convicted, sentenced to death. But then in 1972, California temporarily abolished the death penalty, so their sentences were commuted to life in prison.
Manson died in prison in 2017. Atkins died in 2009. But some are still inside, or recently released.
Right. Leslie Van Houten was released on parole just last year, 2023, after serving over 50 years.
Right.
Hugely controversial. Patricia Krenwinkel and Tex Watson are still incarcerated, repeatedly denied parole. The horror of their crimes means they face immense public opposition to ever being released.
Okay, so if we step back and look at all three, McCann, Ramsey, Manson, these huge culture-shifting cases, what are the common threads? What links them besides just being famous crimes?
Well, the first is definitely the theme of parental nightmares, but experienced so differently.
Yeah. The McCanns faced the nightmare of that choice dining 180 feet away. A potentially preventable tragedy, maybe. That's the haunting question for them.
Whereas the Ramseys' nightmare is waking up to find the horror already inside their safe space. No choice involved, just sudden devastation within the home. And Roman Polanski, the other families in the Manson case, the nightmare of losing loved ones to completely random, senseless, ideologically driven violence from outsiders.
And in almost all these cases, the grieving families themselves came under intense scrutiny, the persecution of the grieving.
Absolutely. The McCanns were made arguidos, official suspects, based on evidence that just crumbled.
The Ramseys were tried and convicted in the court of public opinion for years, even after the DA refused to indict. and doubts lingered for some even after the DNA exoneration.
It shows how, in these huge media storms, there's this intense pressure to find a culprit, and the closest, most available targets are often the family members themselves. Simple grief isn't allowed. Suspicion takes over.
Which brings us straight to the media circuses. How did the intense media attention impact these investigations? Was it a help or a hindrance?
It's complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the McCann case, you could argue both ways. The media glare generated massive public awareness, huge amounts of money for the Find Madeleine Fund, and eventually pressured the UK government into launching Operation Grange. That's a positive.
What?
But that same media frenzy likely contributed to the chaos and contamination of the initial scene in Portugal. It fueled the suspicion against the McCanns, creating friction between the British and Portuguese investigations. It arguably made a difficult job even harder.
And the Ramsey case, the media seemed almost entirely destructive there.
Pretty much.
Oh.
It amplified every police mistake, the contaminated scene, the jurisdictional fights between the police and the DA. It fixated on the Paget angle, often overshadowing the actual facts of the murder. It turned the family's tragedy into a kind of reality TV show.
Manson was different again, though. The media circus was the trial itself.
Yeah, the trial was the story. The bizarre behavior, Manson's pronouncements, the followers' loyalty. The media coverage didn't so much hinder the investigation as it cemented Manson as the face of ultimate, unpredictable evil in the American consciousness. It defined him culturally.
So these cases really push the limits of justice, don't they? They raise some fundamental questions.
Definitely. Like, can you be guilty of murder without physically being there? Manson's conspiracy conviction gives a clear legal yes to that. Your control, your intent can be enough.
And when does forensic evidence actually clear someone? The Ramsey DNA exonerated them legally.
But because of the questions about the amount of DNA, the possibility of contamination, it didn't erase all public doubt. It created reasonable doubt legally, but not absolute certainty for everyone.
Whereas with the McCanns, the initial forensic evidence, the dog alerts pointed towards them, put them under suspicion for a year, and then was totally discredited.
Yeah.
So forensics can cut both ways and isn't always infallible.
Exactly. It's about interpretation, context, and the quality of the evidence itself.
And the cost. We mentioned the millions spent on the McCann and Ramsey investigations. £13 million for Operation Grange, over $13 million for Ramsey. Huge public resources poured in.
And yet, fundamental questions remain. No definitive resolution in either case. Justice, or at least certainty, has a very high price tag, and sometimes even that isn't enough.
We also touched on class and coverage. That missing white woman syndrome. Our sources really do suggest Madeleine McCann's background played a role in the sheer scale of the global response.
It's hard to ignore. Would a missing child from a different demographic have commanded £13 million from Scotland Yard years later? It's a difficult question, but the disparity in coverage for cases like these compared to others is a well-documented phenomenon. It forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about whose lives and whose tragedies get deemed most newsworthy or important by society and the media. So we've walked through 3 incredibly dark chapters, 3 families shattered by completely different kinds of evil: stranger abduction, suspected family involvement, cult nihilism, and the passage of time. It's brutal when you think about who the victims would be today.
Yeah, that really hits home. Madeleine McCann, she was 3. She'd be 21 years old now.
JonBenét Ramsey, who was 6, she would be 34 today.
And Sharon Tate's baby, the one she pleaded for, a boy they plan to name Paul Richard Polanski.
Yeah.
He would be 55 now. Just lives stolen, futures erased.
And where do things stand now? The final status? Well, it's still active in a way. Christian Bruckner is the prime suspect for Madeleine's disappearance. German prosecutors are sticking to their guns, saying they believe she's deceased, but they still don't have the body or enough direct evidence to charge him with murder yet. It's this strange limbo.
And the Ramsey case, it hinges on that unknown male DNA profile, doesn't it? That tiny piece of biological evidence. The hope there lies in future technology, maybe advanced genetic genealogy, finally putting a name to that profile.
That's the hope, a potential breakthrough decades later.
So we've seen these 3 immense tragedies, all amplified, maybe even distorted by media sensation, all marked by significant investigative failures, whether it was contamination or misinterpretation, all tangled up in complex legal and judicial issues.
Yeah, from parents being wrongly suspected to controversial conspiracy convictions.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. We live in this age of information overload, right? Every detail, every theory, every rumor in cases like these gets blasted around the world instantly. Does that actually help us find the truth? Or does it just muddy the waters?
Is definitive truth even possible anymore in these massive high-profile cases? Or are we just destined to live forever in the shadow of the plausible what-if? Constantly searching for a certainty that even millions of pounds and dollars and decades of investigation haven't been able to buy.
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.